You would kind of think that the intentional starvation of a child who was held against his will by a religious extremist would make more international news, because that's what a judge said yesterday in Israel, that the prisons minister in Israel, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is most famous for putting a picture on his wall of a convicted terrorist who carried out a mass shooting in the 90s. That's what he did. He had that picture on his wall as a celebration. He is the guy who is in charge of prisons, and yesterday a judge in Israel unsealed a court case in which last year he ruled, from the evidence that was provided by the prison, by the coroner, that Walid Ahmed, a 17-year-old boy who was in prison on no charges, he had no charges against his name, he was detained under a military law where the Israeli government can just say, we're accusing you of a crime, but we are providing no evidence, we're not formally charging you, and he was held against his will. Now, he was complaining of not being fed properly for months, and then he eventually got an infection which killed him. Now, the judge ruled, based off of the coroner's report, that he was starved to death, or likely starved to death, because technically it's the infection that killed him, but it's the fact that he lost such an insane amount of weight, muscle, fat loss in his body so severely and so quickly, his immune system was unable to fight back against this infection, and that's what killed him. And yesterday this judge in Israel unsealed this case. This happened towards the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, and you would think that maybe this would get more news, that the same Israeli minister who is in charge of these prisons, just a few months ago, the High Court ruled, after multiple petitions from multiple human rights groups, that Palestinians were not getting fed properly in prisons. And the High Court actually ruled in Israel that this was true, that Palestinians were not actually being fed properly in Israeli prisons. And I guess I'm just naive to think that in 2026 that this would actually make international news. Like, when I see these stories, I kind of think like maybe this is just maybe this is the moment then people will kind of like finally wake up. And I guess I'm just so naive to think that the death of a child who was starved to death by a religious extremist in a country which is still technically a democracy. It's not a liberal democracy. It's still technically a democracy, a country which, most of our countries that we live in the West are technically still allied with, who they write strongly worded letters and say, oh, you guys have been very bad, don't do this. And then, we continue selling them arms and weapons, and they're starving children to death in prisons. And you would just think that maybe this would get more attention.